I want to fast forward a little to say 2019 or 2018, where talk of elections will be in the air again. Of course, they will be in the air from now to possibly 2019, but at least they don't get as heated until a year before the elections, where INEC would also still be in the spotlight, but may not necessarily be distributing or having to distribute about 68 million cards. This particular situation is a little peculiar in the sense that they had to get those cards all out at once. You say that government interference or government declaring a public holiday, would that have been interpreted as interference as well?
If it was done at the instance of INEC, yes. But if it is done by government alone, people may begin to read meanings. We play politics of everything in this country. It may be that, the government has an intention. But if INEC says, look, we need to do this.
They mean government at all levels, if different states were to also latch onto it?
Because if government at all levels, of course.
Because state governments declared the public holidays. No one interpreted that as the government interference, did they?
But I think, seriously speaking, that I think INEC ought to take the initiative. It is the independent National Electoral Commission.
Is it too late?
Well, this is elections a few days away. I mean, it's possible. It's possible, but it's going to be a lot of challenge because there are so many issues involved in the election process now that a lot of people are involved. Even if you declare election day holiday today, you won't have the kind of response you would have had maybe a month ago.
Because I was actually going to look at another arm of government that we have actually, totally somehow ignored in the scheme of things, and that has to do with the grassroots governance. And it would seem as if, they haven't on their own been able to take up the challenge and help in educating the populace. Because if you talk about the rural areas or the rural populace or anywhere whatsoever, because these are closer to the people, but we seem to have ignored that all the day on their own, sit back and just watch the game go.
Well, of course, you and I know that local government system has been, destroyed. Most state governments cannot understand the need for them to allow local governments to function the way they ought to. And you find that in the last couple of years, most governors really control the finances of local governments. And therefore, they do not have the capacity to do what you are saying they should do. And on the other hand, the government has a NOAA, National Electoral Agency, which is supposed to be in all the local government areas. And I was the director there, and I know that in many cases, they in fact assisted local government to do enlightenment at the grassroots level. What we need to do is to strengthen such an institution, ensuring that they can function the way they ought to function. Luckily for us, it's all over the place. Indeed, in the area of distribution of PVC, they could have assisted because the structure that is there. So I think we need to do a lot more in terms of working together, collaborating together, partnering with other institutions to allow us to achieving our goals. But for me, if we get to the point that election is 24 hours, and we discover that we do not, especially in the Southwest, have up to 60% or more of our voters, then INEC may begin to reconsider its decision to use either the PVCs or even may allow the temporary voter's card. I mean,
well, the Southwest did record more than that, at least. Even in the state that had problems, which was Ogun State, I believe the figure went up to as high as 61% by Saturday from the figures that INEC released. And that is, well, we don't know if the situation in Ogun State will still be extended.
Well, my problem is this. When you talk about 61% in an election, it means that the remaining 39% do not matter in an election. Every vote counts in an election. When we do not allow 39% to vote on account of, not because of their own faults, but because the system hasn't allowed them to get access to the PVC.
No, that's where the controversy lies, because many think, well, because there are so many PVCs out there that people just wouldn't go and pick up. Either they've relocated, they didn't meet the deadline to transfer their data to where they are so they can pick up the PVCs. And then there are those who genuinely went out there to collect but were not able to get it. So, but if we lump them all together and say it's just because the system didn't allow them, that may not entirely be the case.
There's this controversy as to how you achieved 90% somewhere and 38% somewhere else. What were the magic approaches that were used in places? I would love to see a uniform approach. If you develop an approach to reach out to people in a particular area, you also should develop different or same kind of approach in other areas. For me, I think what is lacking here is the openness in terms of deciding how, or telling us how you were able to distribute these PVCs. I think INEC need to do better in terms of coming clean. This is approach adopted in a particular place, and we also adopted a different approach in another place. For me, it will give a kind of confidence that INEC was fair. But then, again, like I said, we're learning. These issues, we're trying to improve the electoral process through some of these measures. So we would like to make mistakes as we...
The chairman of the commission was here, and part of what he said, if I remember properly, was that they distributed it the same way. It's just like, I mean, my analogy now, in a football game, the coach decides the tactics he wants to play. If he plays a diamond formation or a 4-4-2, it's the players that make the system work. Same here. If INEC adopts the same approach, as they say they did in this case, and the people don't come forward, some come forward much more than the others, how do we blame INEC?
Well, you see, if you are a player within the system and you listen to what people say, there are many insinuations here and there, which we cannot begin to discuss here. But I think that we need to be more scientific. It's not good enough to say we adopt the same approach. We need to know what approaches you adopted. This INEC is a public institution. It is accountable to us Nigerians. We should know why, how, where they do their things so that we can be confident. So we need to be the confidence of the people in public institutions, not just INEC. And it's only when they come out clean to say how we have done this that we can begin to say, look, yes, we're confident. If there are areas of lacks, we can understand, and I will support them. But I believe that to a large extent we need to ensure that people have access to voting on election day. And it doesn't matter how we do it. This election is critical. 10 votes can make a difference.
You know, talking about access, another thing that comes to mind here has to do with movement on that day. Perhaps we haven't actually thought about it properly. Recall that, most people had to register based on where they were working at that point in time, not even where they lived, because a whole lot of Nigerians didn't have the time to go back home and register before coming back to work. So if I had registered close to my workplace and I live maybe in another axis of town, and you say no movement on that day, there are a lot of people who can't move, because you don't expect every Nigerian to now move closer to a workplace, lodge in a hotel, and say they want to cast their vote. Don't you think we should also, in trying to, change things in the future, as Mark said, like fast tracking, some of the things we should be looking at is movement of persons. We can say you can move within state, but you can't go outside the state on election day.
But the restriction of movement of people was born out of experience. You know that people could vote in Lagos Island and come to Maryland and to vote, double voting. Things that have happened in the past will inform some of these measures. I think what we need to be thinking about is for INEC to improve on the process of transferring your voting place. For example, if you're registered in Maryland, for example, and you choose to transfer your voting points to Lagos Island, it should be fast. It should be a lot easier for them. Again, that also tells us INEC need to do a lot more in terms of doing research on logistics or how to improve on its capacity for some of these things. And I think INEC should also encourage other institutions to work with them, seed some of these things to them, so they can face the major task of improving on the management of the election process itself.
Focusing on your party now, I mean, elections across the world, the incumbent is always in the eye of the storm, where the opposition target is always to get them out of the way. Is your party a bit jittery going into these elections?
PDP is ever confident because, see, there's only a party that has remained one since the very beginning. I always look at it, there are two parties in the country, PDP and other parties. Because it is the only party that has remained consistent over time. When you talk about political parties in this country, we tend to look at them in terms of ad hoc organizations. That has been a major part of our problem as a nation. But in PDP, there has been an attempt to strengthen the institutions of the political party. Others have what you would call these dominant characters who determine many things. But in PDP, there's so much going on in terms of institutional building. I mean, for example, our institute, for example, is an aspect of that deliberate attempt to strengthen the PDP as an institution. Mind you, political parties are first and foremost organizations. And if you do not strengthen that institution of organization, you cannot really talk about democracy.
Is that working? Because many will quickly cite internal democracy. In your party, take a look at the party primaries, the kinds of acrimony and complaints that dotted the landscape at the time that held. And then they say, well, if that were the case, if you're doing as much, how come it's not reflecting with the primaries?
You see, internal democracy is something we have to grow. It's something we have to invest in. It is when you strengthen the internal mechanisms within an organization, you can talk about internal efficiency. Yes, PDP will not be 100% efficient in terms of the way it manages internal politics, but it is still the best. There's no other party that can talk about intra-party challenges, intra-party dynamics that PDP experience. In other parties, somebody will say, that's the candidate, that's the candidate. See, the fact that you have these schisms within the party, within PDP.
Didn't PDP experience that too?
PDP did, but in PDP there's no question of somebody imposing. See, what you find in PDP are interplay of forces, which is normal in the political party. I mean, someone wins, someone who loses. But what we still are working on is strengthening the capacity of that party, of the PDP, to broaden its capacity to ensure that there's a lot more in terms of providing the system for the average person who doesn't have the means to emerge. And let me say this, I am an example of what happens in PDP. I didn't know anybody when I applied, it was advertised. I was appointed based on a competitive interview. If you talk about people imposing, I was the least likely to be appointed as the DG of PDI. So the point therefore is this, it is a party that has that internal desire, internal dynamics to ensure that there's a fair playing ground for everyone. So in effect, what I'm saying is this, we're not perfect as a party, but we are growing. But other parties are not even making an attempt at all. It is one person who decides. I mean, you hear what they say, you are the senatorial candidate, that's it. You can't challenge them. In PDP, you can challenge, and that is why it is still robust. It is still the only party that has what I could call the framework for a better Nigeria, given this opportunity for participation.